What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, there's real football stuff going on with spring ball. There's off-the-field football stuff going on with, it's not officially talking season, but we are talking, and it is the preseason for football. So, I don't know what you want to call it, but it's spring football. So we got a few different topics to hit tonight, but man, how are you?
Dude, I'm great. It's been a minute since we did this, been a couple weeks off, but glad to be back on it. It's one of these times where, because the transfer portal is closed, because some of that drama has ended, we had all the surprise stuff, at the end of the season with Nick Saban retiring, coaching carousel, all of that kind of stuff. It has been a little bit quiet. We've had a little bit of light shown on, NFL draft and college pro days. We finally got spring practice started. There's some information going, some info's coming in, this, that, and the other. We're going to have maybe, that next window of transfer portal. So that'll kind of be a good lead in to really see what everybody's roster truly looks like prior to this season. Cause that's the last opportunity for anyone that's going to be eligible this year. So a lot of that kind of stuff happening. But while there's kind of this dead time, we get a little nugget dropped on us, a little SEC schedule nugget for next year.
I want to go back to one thing real quick. Transfer portal window.
Yeah.
So Josh Pate, shout out, friend of the show, said on the show this week, I think, that number one, he said it's going to be the craziest window we've ever seen, the spring window.
Oh, this one. Yeah.
And he said he was just talking to, so he's been traveling around to several campuses, and he's doing a little spring traveling tour or whatever. He said that he was talking to a head coach who said he knows that basically one position group is about to get just hit hard portal in the spring. But then he listed who they're going to get in to replace those guys from other rosters. So,
oh my goodness.
It's just yeah. And then I heard Kirby Smart say in a press conference that usually when a player comes and tells him they're going to the portal, they usually know where they're going.
They have a plan.
They have a plan. Yeah. So all that's happening right now, and the problem is no one can stop it, and no one's going to stop it. It is what it is. Which almost makes me be like, hey, can we just skip to whatever's next? We are in this in between eras in college football right now, and because conference realignment has happened. We'll get to this. I don't think we're done with conference realignment.
Right.
NIL, we ripped the Band-Aid off, and then the NCAA got sued. Now that, transfers, they can't enforce the one-time transfer rule now, and they can't police NIL, and it's just okay, this is chaotic. Can we just skip to where this is back in order? Because I do think it's going to get back in order, right? I mean,
yeah. I mean, markets correct themselves.
Right.
There will be checks and balances, and as long as there is a vacuum of leadership, there will continue to be kind of this Wild West mentality. But I think you're starting to see some positioning, jockeying for position of conference commissioners, and they're starting to kind of chest out this whole conference realignment and everything. All Greg Sankey with the SEC, you kind of see him becoming more of that that CEO, visionary, and kind of forecasting and thinking about big things in the future, and always kind of keeping the cards close to the vest as far as what's happening behind the scenes. Because there's always something that we're what's going to happen with the next shoe to drop. So, the Big Ten, the SEC, right now, the trajectory, I mean, we'll kind of start here, I think.
Yeah.
We were going to start somewhere. Let's start here. The trajectory is leading to this becoming an AFC, NFC situation, in the NFL. Jacob, I'm just going to ask you, can you name what are the top 5 schools that are the most valuable outside of the Big Ten and the SEC?
Most
Take into account
valuable?
most valuable, like that
I know,
are desired to be joined into a conference. You could
I mean,
do
4 right
like
off the bat.
program history, like, you could obviously market, TV, all that stuff. However you want to quantify it, what would your top 5 be?
And the first 4 are easy. It's Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina. Like, done. 5? Gosh. I mean, I'm still probably going to go to the ACC. I like Virginia Tech.
I think
Virginia?
you're forgetting somebody big.
Oh, gosh. In the ACC?
I mean, if I said kind of, you would get it. Kind of in the ACC.
Oh no. Okay, Notre Dame.
No, so Notre Dame's biggest fish.
Yes.
Obviously,
There you go. That's the 5.
They've been
5.
so obvious, but I agree with you to a certain extent. I push back on Miami a little bit, because I don't even think they care. But yeah, I
care.
agree.
They're investing.
Okay,
They're recruiting. I just think Cristobal's a terrible game day coach.
I think I mean, the fans don't care. They don't show up. There's a lot of that kind of. I don't know. I don't know how valuable that market. Yeah.
This is a good conversation. Miami. If they were good, I think fans show up. Like, I think with Miami, you have to earn the fans. Rather, like, they're not a fan base that if they're 4-8, they're showing up and packing out the stadium. I think of Miami as 11-1. And remember when Mark Richt had them like 10-0? When they played Notre Dame at night, and that stadium was sold out, packed, black jerseys. So when Miami's winning, I think the people show up. Like,
I do think that they also are holding on to at least 20 years in the past of this is what we can be, and
I agree.
that they're obviously on our backlist for a reason. So there's that.
I agree.
It's tough to quantify, and I told you to name 5, and I do think they would be probably number 5 of the 5. So that's not an issue there. The funny thing is Notre Dame seems like a slam dunk to, like, they make so much sense for the Big Ten. They have the natural rivalries, Michigan, USC, if all heck breaks loose, they're going there. Florida State and Clemson, I think, have a harder time being Florida State potentially to the Big Ten. Their natural geographical fits, obviously, to the SEC.
Right.
But, Jacob, the whole thing driving this thing is money.
Yeah.
The one who's sitting with the most value to me is North Carolina. They are in a TV market that neither one of the big boys have. They have a great brand. They have, good money. They can do all the things.
I mean, they're a blue blood for basketball.
Yeah, but they've got a good football program too. At least, like, they've got NFL guys. I just think that of them, I think if outside of Notre Dame, I think is the crown jewel of, like, if someone can pull them based on, being able to get out of this ACC grant of rights, which, we'll assume that someone's able to get out at some point. Notre Dame's the obvious crown jewel. It seems like it's too easy for it to go to the Big Ten. I think the next most valuable team and the one that everybody's going to go after will be North Carolina.
Above Florida State?
Above Florida State. I think that North Carolina is the first one that they try to grab. Well, I say that, and then I think they also have great academic. So, like, for Big Ten profile, they fit a lot of the things that Big Ten likes to say. So I think for the Big Ten, at least, they're more valuable. And then because I think they're more valuable to the Big Ten than Florida State, I think they're more valuable overall because I don't think that the SEC values Florida State because they have the University of Florida already in that state. And I don't think everybody just was ready to cut in everybody at the, full member price. Obviously, you see that happening in the ACC where, what is it, SMU is not getting paid for the first 9 years. I mean, there probably won't be an ACC at that point to get paid off of. And then Cal and Stanford are, getting half shares or something like that. You look at, obviously, what's happened in the Big Ten with Oregon and Washington both getting half a share. Obviously, still better than not being part of the Big Ten. But the SEC, they haven't had to do that yet. But if they cut anybody else in, I think that that's kind of going to be in the conversation because these member schools, especially South Carolina and Florida, they are not going to cut in Clemson and Florida State and be like, kumbaya, this is fine with me. They can be a full member. Texas brought in so much more than what, like Texas A&M couldn't turn that down because it was Texas, They had to kind of play nicely. Clemson and Florida State
they didn't want it.
Don't carry. Yeah, Clemson and Florida State don't carry that same thing that Texas did.
So, okay, a couple things. This is great. I'm like, we haven't got the chance to talk about this yet. Okay, Florida State's desire. I'll say, I think location. excuse me. Location with TV market, I think is a lower value than it used to be because of national games and national brands. Like Florida State's never playing locally where oh, you're going to get the Tallahassee market on this one.
Yeah.
Florida State's such a big brand that people just want to watch that Seminole play. And everyone's going to watch Florida State, Georgia over Florida State, Boston College. Or right. Florida State, Texas, whatever, over Florida State, Syracuse. No one's hammering for the New York market. It's just because Florida State's a big brand.
Yeah.
Because you could argue Syracuse is in New York, and if you want New York City, why isn't the Big Ten hounding Syracuse?
Yeah.
But so that's one thing with Florida State that I think TV market location, for the SEC being they already have Florida. I just think you're amassing logos at this point. The money. So the Big Ten's TV deal was only 7 years, which I think is brilliant. The short-term deals. I mean, the fact that the Big Ten will have signed 2 new TV contracts before the ACC signs 1 is pretty funny.
Yeah.
And with the half share stuff. So this year, or is it next year? ESPN has a kill switch on the grant of rights. Basically, but they have to let them know, I think it's this spring, if they're going to pull the kill switch in 2026. ESPN is the one who holds the cards here. So, what else does ESPN have the rights to? Oh, they just signed a 10-year deal with the SEC. So, obviously, the SEC, I agree with you. No one else is going to give up their share to Florida State. ESPN would have to come back and say, okay, we will offer more money. This is the same reason, which we're going to get into, that the SEC has yet to go to 9 games, is ESPN was not offering more money for a 9th game.
Right.
So beyond the whole, SEC scared to play the SEC, it's really about ESPN's not ponying up more money for an extra game. Why would they create more of a TV product? So that's my thing is, if ESPN pulls the plug on the ACC grant of rights, which they have the ability to do this year, and it would go into effect in 2026, that would then free up the money ESPN is paying the ACC to add to the SEC's deal to bring in a Florida State and a Clemson, which I think are the 2 schools that, of course, make the most sense for joining that conference. It's all fascinating. It's fun to talk about. And I'm excited that when it's sitting here on Saturday, what's the date there? August 31st, and Miami lines up in Ben Hill Griffin Stadium, it's not going to matter. I'm glad we're going to worry about ball that day. But
for sure.
It's fun to talk about. Again, I'm almost let's skip to where this is all finished. I think we're going to have some answers soon. I mean, I think we're going to have some answers. We'll be able to have a podcast about this year of what it's going to look like. Of course, with the lawsuits going on right now, I thought it was hilarious. Bud Elliott, who has a law degree, Tom Ferdelli covered through his argument with him, and he was like, "You guys agreed to a grant of rights." He was like, "Well, that actually, Tom, it's an interesting legal question. Did we agree to the grant of rights?" Because that's the whole like, yeah, we signed, but really we didn't agree to this. Is kind of their argument, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's an interesting legal question.
You know that because the ACC is based in North Carolina, that's another thing I was reading about. So you have to sue them in the state of North Carolina. UNC, they reside in North Carolina. They are waiting to file anything because they're letting Clemson and Florida State essentially. Chuck Oliver calls it fighting in the front yard. He's like, what's the worst thing you can do as a family is fight in the front yard. And that's what Florida State and Clemson are doing right now with the ACC. North Carolina, they said, hey, I don't know if you know, but nobody gets the degree from the Atlantic Coast Conference. They get it from universities. So most of them are University of North Carolina grads, and they're all lining the court system in in North Carolina. So whenever that time comes, North Carolina is going to have a very smooth transition. They're going to find that's why I think I'm high on them as a program to as far as they're going to be very sought after. I think people are going to fight for them. NC State is going to be the consolation prize because NC State's going to luck out and find themselves in a conference because
taking losses.
Yeah, that's true. But they're going to find themselves in one of the bigger conferences because one is not going to let the other one be in a market that they're not. And so North Carolina, I'm just calling it. North Carolina goes to the Big Ten whenever this happens. The SEC is going to reluctantly accept NC State if that's the case. I'm not closing the door on Georgia Tech getting a backdoor into the Big Ten because of their academia and being in Atlanta. Big Ten wants to plant a flag in Atlanta, and I think that that's the case. And that's also why I'll still hear your argument for Miami being a viable option, because I think that Miami can also make sense for the Big Ten and them being able to plant a flag in the state of Florida, as far as just a market to say, they have Big Ten, so all of that, it really rides on the side of the Big Ten, but it'll be interesting to see.
That's the North Carolina location thing. That's part of the argument is Florida State wants this to be heard in the state of Florida, and the ACC wants it to be heard in the state of North Carolina. The ACC, I will say, something that just happened that fell into Florida State and Clemson's hand, because their argument basically is that the ACC has not protected their value as a conference, and they haven't valued their teams. And guess what just happened? We just got the new playoff deal where the ACC signed off on taking less money. And so the ACC just literally signed off saying, we are about half as valuable as the SEC and Big Ten financially, because that's what we just signed off for in a TV deal. So I think that will be used as heavy evidence of, look, Jim Phillips, you literally just admitted that you've made this conference half as valuable when it used to be just as valuable. Therefore, it's like a dereliction of duty, and you haven't upheld the value of the conference. Therefore, you don't have the right to our grant of rights that we willingly signed off on. That just happened. So I think that's an interesting thing that was like, oh yeah, new playoff deal that will have an implication on the Florida State and Clemson case, which is interesting. We just spent 20 minutes on the ACC.
That's fair. It was
that's
organic.
How it is, man.
With that, let's just jump into the SEC schedule reveal, because that is kind of what led into this.
Yep.
Part of Greg Sankey doing his due diligence of looking ahead and thinking about everything. Yeah, they're not going to sign on to play a 9th game if they're not going to get paid more to do it. They also don't want to adopt a schedule model that might get blown up in 2 years when they do all this planning for every 4 years, these teams can do this. For those who, aren't aware, the two big time models that the SEC is at least considered adopting is an 8-game schedule where they have 1 permanent opponent, 7 rotating, or a 9-game schedule where they have 3 regular opponents and 6 rotating. This would allow every other year you're cycling through the whole conference. So yeah, and then every 4 years you're able to play at every venue. So kind of a good thing for the student athletes to be able to, in their 4 years in college, be able to play at every school, seeing as how Texas A&M joined the SEC in 2012 or 2014, excuse me. Right? It was 2014.
2014,
it was the SEC network.
Mm-hmm.
And UGA has still not played at Texas A&M in College Station. So, it just is what it is. Now, what I think, Jacob, the reason that they did this is, yes, the reason of, hey, we're not going to give you more games for no reason. And we're also going to see what happens because in 2 years, this whole 12-team playoff thing gets revoted on and we'll be going to potential 14-team and all that stuff, and that's TBD, more to come. We'll see what happens with, all the conference stuff at that point. I also think that Greg Sankey is doing a good job of protecting the rivalries for 2 more years. Some rivalries that obviously come to mind: Georgia-Auburn, the Deep South's oldest rivalry. If we're being honest, and they go down to a 1-7 schedule model with 8-game conference schedule, Georgia and Florida are going to be that team, those teams that play, and you're going to lose one of the most historic rivalries out there because obviously Auburn and Alabama are going to stick as their one rival, an Iron Bowl. So you would lose a rivalry for doing something as like a one-off year. So just keep the schedule, flip it, everybody plays, and you can reciprocate this schedule to your home fans and to your away fans. You do it that way for 1 year while you figure it all out. And then at that point, maybe go to a 9-game schedule or figure something out. Because I don't think you can. Some of these schools have to let some rivalries go every year and they'll have to go to every other year or whatever. But, some of these, they need to still play every year and they probably have more than one. So hopefully at that point, it is a 9-game schedule. They get the money right. And all these regional rivalries, that's what's so good about college football. They've got to keep them intact. You can't devalue them just because of maybe recent history, with a program. Like, college football is built on tradition. So I appreciate that touch because I was with them staying 8 games. My first thought was, oh, that means a couple of these rivalries, Florida, LSU, Georgia, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, some of these just right off the cuff are just going to get axed, Ole Miss, LSU, a bunch of them. So I'm glad to see they're all going to stay at least for 1 more year.
Something else to consider with the SEC sticking with this for 1 more year is kind of how we started this conversation. Who's going to be in the SEC in 2026?
Right.
So why create a new system that's the 3-6 model when, instead of 16 teams, we now have 18 or 20 teams. And now you need a whole new model. So yeah, protect the rivalries for the time being. This works for now. If you're Sankey, you obviously know there's a really good chance your conference might not look the same here in a couple of years. And yeah, why create a system that you're just going to rip up and throw away anyway? I do think it's for the teams that have a really difficult schedule, kind of sucks. You kind of got screwed. For the teams that have a really easy schedule, now you kind of have a window. I mean, like Missouri. I think Missouri has the easiest schedule in the SEC this year. Now you kind of get 2 years of that. You're in this window where 12-team playoff, Missouri. This is like, you better strike while the iron's hot. And you got a bunch of returning starters this year. And then a team like Florida, Billy Napier trying to save his job with the toughest schedule in the country. And
oh man,
it's like, hey, if you save it this year, just know that you get that pretty much the same schedule on deck for next year.
we're running it back.
We're running it back. It's like, oh well, you don't have to go, to Ole Miss, but you got to go to LSU now. So have fun. Gosh. Oh, and hey, you might get who else they play this year? Like, you don't have to go to Tennessee, but you do have to go to A&M next year now. So have fun. Man, yeah, poor Florida, man. And if you're Vanderbilt, you're kind of screwed either way. It doesn't really matter who you play.
They're just pumped to be in the SEC, to be honest with you. They're going to keep it real. They're like, we're collecting checks. I don't know how this worked out. We were the star of the Jefferson Pilot noon kickoff for about 15 years in the SEC, and they still just keep trotting us out there. We are their token smart school. We will always be their token smart school. We get to lie to everybody about how much we pay our people because we're a private school. It makes us feel nice and pretty. The SEC likes to keep ties in Nashville. It's just like they got a lottery ticket and it paid off for them, and they're just coattailing it forever.
That's right. That's right.
And they're just like, hey, we're not gonna, I'm gonna leave sleeping dogs lie. I'm not gonna mess with them. I'm just gonna let them do their thing. We're just gonna say yes to whatever Alabama and Georgia want to do. We're just gonna say yes and be toe the company line.
They're the ones chanting SEC.
Yeah, and they should be.
They're so proud. They're like, Georgia won a title. How great is this for us?
This is awesome.
Bama made the playoffs.
Great job.
Shout out to our conference.
Yeah. Best conference out there, I'd say.
We get to get beat by them year in and year out. Look at us.
Look at us. Look at us. Who would have thought?
It just means more. Cleaning up in baseball, though. Daniel, what are the topics you want to hit? Those are the big two for me. I'm glad we flushed out the Florida State, Clemson, SEC schedule. That was good.
Yeah, that one's kind of been out there. It's kind of been stinky. We had to acknowledge it. So I think I'm good as far as we're concerned at this point. Definitely want us to get back on and get some NFL draft info going. That's obviously going to be hot in April. We'll probably do 2 shows in April, I would imagine. One of them regarding like spring games and wrap up, and then the other one being like a NFL draft preview. Maybe we'll do like a live draft like we did last year, something along that line. And then, I'm sure we'll do some sort of a recap of, I think early May is when the portal is doing its thing. So that's probably what we've got on.
Yeah.
And then May, I'm just kind of thinking out loud, just so everybody can know what our plans are. We'll probably try to do some sort of stock up, stock down like we've done the past several years.
That'll be a good time after the transfer portal window.
Yeah. With David Cobb, hopefully, Lord willing, we can get our good friend from CBS Sports back on.
That's right.
And then that will probably lead us into doing preview season.
It's coming.
And then we'll probably do something special with EA College Football when that comes out in July. So
we'll have to do a live stream or something.
Yeah, maybe a live stream game against each other. I don't know. Yeah.
Love it. I'm so excited. Dude, that's like I've tried to forget about the game coming out. That way it just like sneaks up on the summer and it's like this surprise.
Yeah.
Can't wait to take off a couple days of work to play that game.
For sure.
We'll see.
Who says I'm going to get any work done? I'm just going to play it while I'm working.
That's right. Kidding. That's right. On the clock.
There's absolutely no way.
That's right. Oh, man. Well, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at The Extra Point Pod. You can follow Daniel on Twitter /X at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That'll do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.